Today's video is all about perspectives and continents. Let's start by taking a look at the world the way we usually see it. Here we got a map of the world. It's a typical map that you'll usually see in your textbook, and it's centered on the equator, which is this line right through here kind of, and the prime meridian, right, which goes right down the center here. And so this perspective of the world, it's centered right here. So I want you to ask yourself, why here? Why is the prime meridian, this line here? Well, it's because British officials decided it would be there. There's no natural reason for the prime meridian to be going right through Greenwich, England. It's just the way it works out because that's the way the British officials decided to do it. So that's why we see the world like this. And that's just something to think about. So let's take a look at the 7 continents you're used to seeing. We've got North America here, South America, Antarctica, Europe, Africa, Asia, and Australia. And these are all the continents you learned in elementary school. And those are fine, but I wanted to talk about a couple other regions that we may talk about this year, and especially in regards to Europe and Asia. I want you to think to yourself, what is the definition you know of a continent? Well, if you said it was a large landmass, almost completely surrounded by water, you're right. But what about Europe and Asia? I mean, it's not like there's some big sea separating these two, right? If it went like that, then maybe Europe and Asia would be separate continents. But they are one big landmass. And so let's take a look at some other ways of classifying the world. And we'll start with Eurasia. Eurasia is a combination of both Asia and Europe. That should have been the other way around. Another way you can classify this, because you can see here that Africa is not really disconnected from this landmass. You could talk about Afro-Eurasia, which is a combination of Africa, Europe, and Asia. Okay, so there's some different ways you can look at the world. Also, we talked a lot about North and South America, but you could also just talk about the Americas, which would comprise both of those. There's a huge amount of water over here, right? And in that water, in the ocean over there, is 25,000 islands that we don't talk a lot about. And so we could classify this area as Oceania, and all the islands involved there. And when we take a look at a globe in just a minute, you'll see how much water is right there. There's one other region of the world I want you to know, because we'll talk about it all year long. You've heard it referred to as the Middle East before, which we'll talk about it. And but you can also call the Middle East Southwest Asia. And that's actually where we're going to start learning a lot about our history, is in Southwest Asia. So let's take a look at perspectives. All right, think back to when we learned about timelines. You took a look at a picture of a shrub from 3 different perspectives, and each one told you different things. Well, we can do the same thing with maps. And this is a perspective that you should be pretty familiar with. This is a close-up perspective of where we go to school. And you can learn a lot of things by looking at the world from this close-up perspective, or this map from this close-up perspective. You can see that there's a park right next to the school. You could see the parking at the school. You could give somebody directions to your house. You could say, hey, turn left on Cornelius Pass, then turn right here, left here, and then you're there, right? That would be one thing you could do with this map. So it's a pretty useful map. And then let's zoom back a little bit and take a look at a landscape view of our area. All right, this is a much different view than the view you were just looking at, right? you got a lot more land here. And you can answer definitely some different questions looking at this map than you could by looking at the other map. So, first of all, you could see the neighboring cities, right? You could see that here's Hillsborough, here's where we're at. We neighbor Beaverton on this side, we neighbor Cornelius on this side. You can see that Portland's all the way over here. And you might notice there's a lot more buildings over here in Portland, right? So you could say, hey, I noticed that Portland is a lot bigger than the neighboring cities. I wonder if it was there first. You might also notice that Forest Grove and Cornelius are right next to each other. You might think, oh, well, you know what? I bet you Cornelius and Forest Grove work together a lot because they're so close to each other. You might also notice that as we move further west, the cities get smaller and smaller and smaller, and a lot of the neighboring area is farmland. And you might have questions about how that influences culture in our area. All right, let's zoom back just a little bit further. Take a look at a panoramic view of our world. And here you go. Here's the panoramic view of our world. Well, now you can't see our city necessarily. You can't see our neighbors, our neighboring cities. But we're right around here. And one of the things you could do now is say, hey, look, we are closer to the Pacific Ocean than we are to the Atlantic Ocean. I wonder how much influence that has on us. You could say, hey, our neighbors are Canada up here and Mexico down here. I wonder how that influences us. So there's definitely different questions you could ask and answer looking at a panoramic view. None of those views are better than the other views, but they do tell you different things. So it all depends on what the questions you're trying to answer are. All right, so let's take a look at the world here. Remember I told you we'd take a look at Oceania when we looked at the globe. Here's Oceania right here. Notice there's not a lot of land masses. You've got 25,000 little islands, including Hawaii right here. And then if we keep going east, here's another view of the world, right? This is not a view you're typically used to seeing. And if you wanted to know what areas of the world we'll be studying this year, this is probably the thing the perspective you're going to see most of this year, because we spend a lot of our time learning about the civilizations that are right around this sea here, the Mediterranean Sea. So this is going to be our perspective for a lot of this year. Were you paying attention? Answer the following questions to find out. Give an example of a time you would want to look at the world close up. Give an example of a time you would want to look at the world from a panoramic view. What are the 7 traditional continents we learn about in school? And what are 3 other regions we talked about today?